Michael Peterson was an American novelist who lost his wife to an unfortunate slip and fall down the stairs. But when the medics showed up, the scene looked way too sketch for a tiny tumble. When Michael is arrested and tried in court, his story begins to twist and turn more than the staircase that he claims ended Kathleen's life. At 2:41 in the morning on December 9th, 2001, a 911 call was placed by a man named Michael Peterson. He said he found his 47-year-old wife, Kathleen, unconscious at the bottom of a staircase, and he presumed she had fallen down the stairs. The medics arrived and came inside to find Michael barefoot in red-stained shorts and a t-shirt cradling his wife. But unfortunately, Kathleen was gone. As soon as the medics took a look around, though, they called the police because they're like, oh, this is a crime scene, honey. So the cops showed up and started asking Michael a timeline of what happened. Michael explained that he and Kathleen had been enjoying a relaxing night by the pool. He said Kathleen went inside around midnight, but he decided to hang outside a bit longer. Around 2:40 in the morning, Michael finally went inside, and that's when he found her. He said they had both been drinking and that she had been taking Valium all night long. So she must have fallen down the stairs. Why does he say it like that? It just makes it sound like she's just popping pills like it's popcorn. And I'm not sure it's possible to take Valium all night long, but what do I know? So now the cops started taking note of some interesting details that seemed suspicious. Like how the amount of red splatters up and down the wall seemed way too violent to match up with someone falling down the stairs. Or the fact that Michael said that he sat outside by the pool until 3 a.m. and he's only wearing shorts and a t-shirt. Because remember, it's December and this took place in North Carolina, so, you know, it's probably colder than a witch's tit by 3 a.m. 2 months later, the autopsy report was published. The medical examiner concluded that Kathleen expired by bludgeoning, which meant her passing was no longer considered an accident. So in the toxicology report, it showed that Kathleen's BAC was only 0.07%, which honestly is like maybe 2 healthy glasses of vino. So like, it's enough to impair your driving, but not enough to make you a serious hazard to yourself. The autopsy also showed that Kathleen had severe injuries, including a neck fracture and 7 complex lacerations on the top and back of her head. The autopsy concluded that the cuts on her head were consistent with the blows from a blunt object, and that she went down from exsanguination about 1.5 to 2 hours after sustaining her injuries, which is essentially medical speak for this lady got her shit wrecked. Not long after the autopsy was published, Michael Peterson was charged and arrested for taking the life of his own spouse. If he was found guilty, he would be looking at spending the rest of his life in prison, which seemed highly likely at this point. Crime scene analysts believe that Kathleen had fallen from the middle of the staircase, which was around 5 steps up, and deemed it impossible to whack your head that many times on the way down. I feel like even if you fall from the top, you're still hitting your head like what? Maybe 3 times on the way down? I mean, there's just no way, right? The photo of the back of Kathleen's head looked like she fell down the staircase from The Exorcist, not the teeny tiny one in her house. Something else that doesn't add up is the fact that Kathleen was found at the scene lying on her back, but after examining her body, officials found a shoe print on the back of her sweatpants that matched the exact shoe Michael said he was wearing that night. But here's the kicker. Oof. Bad choice of words. When the ambulance arrived, they claimed Michael was barefoot. Like, come on, how on earth do you even explain that one? This stew is getting far too spicy. Michael adamantly insisted he was innocent, that there was no way he could ever have done this to his wife. So which was it? Either Kathleen really did fall down the stairs in some bizarre, violent way, or we're dealing with a vicious villain who brutally butchered his wife. And so, in July of 2003, the trial of Michael Peterson began. First, prosecutors asked the paramedics and the police for their testimony and if anything seemed suspicious about the scene. Of course, they all mentioned the amount of sauce savagely sprayed along the staircase and said it seemed very inconsistent with a fall down the stairs. Another detail that paramedics noticed was that it looked like Kathleen had been there for a really long time before the 911 call was made. So Michael really expects us to believe his wife went inside around midnight, immediately fell to the bottom of the stairs, and laid there without him seeing or hearing anything for 2 hours? Like, doesn't he need a pee or even get a jacket? A crime scene technician said he remembered Michael bursting through the doors, covered in red, and running to Kathleen's body where he was like immediately cradling her and slipping around and making an even bigger mess. The technician believed Michael was acting melodramatic so he could account for the fact that he was already covered in Kathleen's juices. So the state ended up bringing in a bunch of medical examiners and crime scene experts who all looked at the evidence and testified that there was too much hemorrhaging at the scene for it to just be a fall down the stairs. They also said it looked like Michael tried to clean up some of the scene and concluded that Kathleen had definitely been bludgeoned. Then the state theorized that Michael beat Kathleen with a blowpoke from the fireplace because it was not in its usual spot. They backed this up with Kathleen's sister, who said she gave her the fireplace tool. She talked about how often Kathleen used it, but mentioned it was always kept in its holder by the fireplace. The police said they searched everywhere in the surrounding areas, but were never able to find the blowpoke, suggesting he had time to remove it from the property. So at this point, the state had the how, but now they need the why. And boy howdy, were they about to stir the pot. So the prosecutor goes up in front of the court and drops an absolute banger of a theory that Michael snuffed Kathleen that night in a rage after she confronted him about the other man. Enter Brad, Michael's new 26-year-old boy toy. That's right, Michael had been exchanging emails with a local hustler named Brad that he found through the internet. The prosecution believed Kathleen probably stumbled upon 2,000 images of naked men that Michael had on his computer. Yes, really. Or maybe she saw some of his flirty email exchanges with Brad and confronted him about it, which resulted in a fight. After this theory was proposed, Michael's bisexuality became a plot point in the trial. Remember, it's the early 2000s, so people thought it was super scandalous that a man could be something other than straight with a wife. On top of this other man narrative, prosecution also said that the Petersons were running out of money. Michael was in an insane amount of debt, and his novels weren't making him much bread to bring home. But if Kathleen were to suddenly go by accident, he would be awarded about $1.8 million in life insurance. And there you go. The state had their who, their what, and their why. So it seemed like this was going to be a done deal. But Michael's defense team was not going down without a fight. Michael's lawyer got up there and said that what truly happened that night was a fatal accident. He said that Kathleen, tipsy from wine and having taken Valium, tried to walk up the stairs in flip-flops and ultimately slipped and met her demise. Then the lawyer addressed Michael's bisexuality and his boy toy, Brad. Of course his name is Brad. The defense pointed out that even though Michael and Brad had exchanged hundreds of steamy emails, they never actually did anything together. They apparently started talking 4 months before the incident, and as much as Michael wanted to put his chili in the Brad bowl, it just never happened. In fact, the first time they ever saw each other in person was in court. Talk about a memorable first impression. So this lawyer claimed Michael and Kathleen were a very happy couple because even in his scandalous emails, Michael talked about how happy he was with his wife and his marriage. Okay, next the defense addresses the money problems. Money problems? What money problems? So the financial analyst that the state had used to verify the credit card debt was forced to confirm that Kathleen and Michael's net worth was still quite a decent amount of money. So wait, did Michael have money or not? I'm so confused, and I bet the jury was too. Then the defense lawyer moved on to the autopsy report. He brought in his own medical examiner, who was a neuropathologist. So instead of saying what he did see in the autopsy report, this guy focused on what he didn't see: any skull or bone fractures. The neuropathologist pointed out that the fact that not having any bone or skull fractures is extremely inconsistent with a usual fatal beating. After this, he called to the stand none other than Henry Lee, the famous medical examiner from the O.J. Simpson case. And Lee's like, oh, suspicious splatter? Been there, done that, let's go. So Lee gets up there and in this big theatrical way, he takes a swig of ketchup and blows it out of his mouth and it flies everywhere. Essentially, he's trying to demonstrate that Kathleen fell in this cartoonish-like way and catches herself halfway down, coughs and spits and splatters, slips and falls again. Yes, it is just as ridiculous as it sounds. But essentially, Lee proves through a series of ways that yes, it is in fact possible to fall down the stairs and make as bad of a mess as Kevin's famous chili. At this point, the defense drops a big zinger on the crowd. Remember the missing blowpoke that 30 officers searched for all around the house and the property? Well, Michael's lawyers somehow got a hold of it and dramatically presented the blowpoke above his head like it's Simba. At that point, the courtroom went nuts. The team revealed that the blowpoke was not mangled or dented in any way, and for the last 20 months, it has sat in the Petersons' garage collecting dust and cobwebs. Apparently, apparently just days before the trial, the defense located the blow poke and it wasn't hidden from the crime scene at all. It had just been completely overlooked by the detectives. So by this point, the defense believed they had sown enough reasonable doubt in the case, from the spatter evidence to the happy, loving marriage to poking holes in the blow poke theory. Not to mention, it was quite helpful that one of Michael's sons and his 2 adopted daughters sat front and center in the courtroom crying for their dad. And just when the jury thought they had heard everything, the judge makes a ruling halfway through the trial that would allow a piece of evidence into the court that would turn it completely on its head. You ready? So the late mother of Michael's adopted daughters, the ones sitting in the courtroom, was also found by Michael Peterson at the bottom of a staircase after she too took a fatal fall down a flight of steps. Can you believe? Let's dig in. So 20 years ago, Michael and his then wife, not Kathleen, were living in Germany, where he had been stationed on an airbase. His wife taught in an American school and became friends with this other teacher named Elizabeth and her husband, who was an Air Force officer. Unfortunately, Elizabeth became a widow when her hubby went missing on a secret mission, so Peterson family took her and her 2 daughters under their wing. One night in 1985, Elizabeth and her kids came over for dinner at the Petersons. After they grubbed, Michael drove Elizabeth and the 2 girls home and helped put the kids to bed. The next morning, Elizabeth's sister, back in the US, gets a dreaded call from Michael. There's been an accident. Your sister, she fell down the stairs. She's gone. When the authorities got there, they found Elizabeth face down at the bottom of the stairs. They concluded the cause to be either a spontaneous hemorrhage in her brain, a stroke, or natural causes. One of these things is not like the other. Okay, but seriously, if I was sitting in that courtroom and I heard that piece of evidence, straight to jail. Straight to jail, Michael Peterson. Elizabeth's will designated the girls go to the Petersons and they all moved back to North Carolina. And there you have it. 1 man, 2 women, both found at the bottom of a staircase. I mean, what are the fucking odds? So halfway through the trial, someone made a phone call to the prosecution and was like, are you aware that this has happened before? And boom, this case from 20 years ago is reopened and you've got this trial within a trial. A trialception. So investigators go and literally dig up Elizabeth's remains and have the medical examiner who looked at Kathleen examine this other girl's remains. The examiner examined her. Say that 5 times fast. So the examiner looked at Elizabeth and found 7 lacerations on her skull. They conclude that Elizabeth also had her brains bludgeoned and did not pass from a brain hemorrhage like the previous examiner who examined her. Okay, now the writers of the show are literally trying to torture me, but seriously, what are the odds that she has the exact same number of lacerations on her skull as Kathleen? So the rest of this investigation involved people flying to Germany, looking at and examining the actual staircase, and a bunch of nannies and neighbors testifying. Finally, it was time to decide Michael's fate, but the jury was all torn up over the whole thing. 4 jury members found Michael guilty, 3 found him not guilty, and 5 couldn't make up their mind. Due to this divide, the jury then had to go over every bit of evidence again and weigh it. The bisexual booty calls, the blow poke, the brain bashing, and the 2 bodies at the bottom of the stairs. Ultimately, the jury said it came down to the photo of the back of Kathleen's head and the autopsy report. Could they truly believe that this was all from a fall down the stairs? Well, they couldn't, because they said, your boy Michael is guilty. And with that, Michael Peterson began his life as a convict. Once the decision was announced, Michael's kids just sat there, stunned, and then his 2 daughters burst into tears. They lost both their parents, and now their stepfather is being taken away from them. That's pretty rough. The kids continued to say their stepfather was innocent to the cameras outside the courtroom. But Caitlin, Kathleen's biological daughter, sided with the jury. She too could not get past the photo and the autopsy report. She called her stepsisters immediately and was like, have you not seen this? Mom did not fall. She was beaten. After that, the sisters never spoke again, and Caitlin had all her belongings removed from the house. In 2003, Michael walked into his cell for the first time, where he was set to live out the rest of his days. But in 2011, 8 years into his life sentence, we find out that one of the key experts in Michael's case is fired from his job for questionable work ethic and misrepresenting evidence. So this guy, Dwayne, was the spatter analyst who was the one that essentially demonstrated that Kathleen had to have been bludgeoned, and the drops on the ceiling proved it. Yeah, it came out that this dude is essentially so full of baloney that in 2016, Michael got a retrial. So in December of 2011, Michael was released from the county jail on a $300,000 bail and placed on house arrest while he awaited his retrial. In 2017, Michael entered something called an Alford plea for manslaughter, which essentially meant that because there was so much evidence against him the first time in court, he had to plead guilty, even though he insisted his innocence just to avoid capital punishment. The judge sentenced him to a maximum of 86 months in prison, but because he had already served 98.5 months, Michael was free to go. To this day, Michael's 2 sons and adopted daughters believe that he is innocent, and Kathleen's sister and biological daughter, Caitlin, believe he is guilty. Michael now lives in a 1,200 square foot condo in North Carolina and has even written a book about his experience called Behind the Staircase. Killer Bites Book Club, anyone? So, what do you think? Was Michael Peterson truly one of the unluckiest men in the world who just so happened to find 2 women at the bottom of a staircase? Or was he a cold-blooded, calculated predator who got away with manslaughter twice? It's an unbelievable story. Either way, the chili bubbles. Stay safe out there.